Take First Alert. Welcome to This Week in Kansas with your host, Tim Brown.
Hello and welcome to This Week in Kansas. Thank you for being with us this morning. Part 2 of the ruling regarding funding of schools here in the state of Kansas says that current funding is inadequate and a violation of the state constitution. This ruling will be appealed, of course, but certainly makes it more difficult for lawmakers to come up with a workable budget. We're about a week away from the start of the legislative session in Topeka. There will be a lot of controversial legislation that will be introduced. Abortion restrictions are almost a certainty, and a religious freedom bill might make an appearance. But we'll begin with the school financing, and this came out, I think it was Tuesday of this week, where we got the ruling around noontime. And Jim, you said your phone started ringing about 10:30 that morning, and you sent me a text, and we all kind of watched for it, and here we are. And it's, I don't know that the ruling is a huge surprise to anybody. I think a lot of people saw this coming, but it's a large number.
Yeah, and it's been a large number for a while. Okay, remember we had started to get into compliance in about 8 years ago, and then we had the economic meltdown. But as the court said in their opinion, 6 years have gone by and nothing's changed. You've stayed stagnant or gone step back from your initial commitments. This is a long history of cases. This isn't the first one. There are about 4 or 5 cases over the last 20 years or so that have all indicated the same thing. We're going to judge you, legislature, and your constitutional responsibility by the money you put in the classroom. The money that is available to pay teachers, to build laboratories for science, to buy textbooks, and to have technology. And that is again what the court pointed to when they said you're failing to meet your constitutional obligation. 2 other takeaways which I thought were very stark. One was said, look, your self-imposed financial crisis, read tax cuts, do not alleviate your responsibilities under the Constitution. And then in another part of the decision they talked about political decisions by the legislature which have handicapped schools' ability to do their job. Those are pretty stark terms, nothing complicated about it.
You know, Richard, I mentioned a large number a moment ago. There's not actually a number associated with this, but from the court, not a specific number, but they do talk about funding levels, and they talk about when funding levels were adequate. So that kind of gives you a number, I suppose, which irritated a few people.
It does, and actually this is the second part of it, because the initial part under the Supreme Court, when they did pass it back down, they also passed a ruling themselves that talked to the equity, and that cost $129 million. And so the amount, they specified what they wanted to make the poor schools and the rich schools more equitable, and that came to 129. But we've known for a long time that this is going to be somewhere in the area of about 450 million. And if everything that was asked for, yes, and if everything that was asked for, it could have been 3 times that amount. Yep. So it's unlikely. But this brings it down to the question then that is being quibbled about as to what makes adequacy. And now we're getting into definitions back and forth, something that courts are very good at, but which you cannot write out in legislation and make completely semantically foolproof. And so on. So the legislature is not the State Board of Education, and it seems like lately there's been a few cases where they've tried to be as well. But here they have an issue both with the State Board and with the Supreme Court.
Well, and it's interesting. You know, we saw in the election cycle this year. It's very interesting to see both the Democrats and the Republicans talk about school funding and school finance, and the differences in how people read that, because the Democrats looked at money going into the classroom, Republicans looked at overall money going into education or the school systems. And they're 2 different things. One has gone up, another has gone down, and there are a variety of reasons for that, and I think that's in part what the court also disagreed with. They said that just because there's more money going into schools in general, it's not getting to the kids, and that's where the issue is.
Yeah, and there are really 3 big pieces that you're talking about now. We're getting pretty deep into the weeds, but one is called the local option budget. Yes. What that means to real people is property taxes, okay? And the court addressed that. They said, well, LOBs, local option budgets, are school funding. They're too uncontrolled by the state and too dependent upon property taxes, which is an unreliable source. And therefore, while you get some merit for that, you can't shift the burden to the locals. It's a state responsibility. The second silo was this whole idea of capers and whether use of capers equals education money. And they said capers is a piece of education funding, and complimented or made some favorable comments about the capers investment. But then that's where I come to my initial point, which is they pivoted right back to the classroom and said, that's where your failure isn't the capers or the LOB, it's because you're not taking care of the classroom. The third area was the special education, which is a state, federal, and local partnership to help our most vulnerable kids. Those are the kids in the wheelchairs and on the respirators and the severely mentally disabled that we give an educational opportunity to. And they said, this is really a different kind of education funding that isn't part of the studies, isn't part of what happens in the classroom with 90% of the kids.
Well, Richard, the LOB is always an interesting thing for me too. When we talk about local option budgets, as Jim just mentioned, we're talking about property taxes, and that's
right.
up to the local districts, local county commissioners to control. And I always felt when we talked about cutting taxes that this was passing the buck, because the state might cut taxes, but the money's still going to come from someplace, and then it's up to your county commissioners, your local school board to ask for more money, and it just kind of passes the buck onto those folks and makes the voters angry at them.
It may. There are differences in communities, though, as we take a look at the schools in Johnson County, to be very specific, and then take a look at some other schools that do not have anywhere near the property value. And what you are seeing in these situations is, in many cases, schools, the rich get rich and the poor get poor, as far as facilities in the classroom and so on. So in some of these school districts, we have parents quite willing and eager to have money turn right around and come right back in through LOB. And so by raising that LOB limit, it has allowed some schools to have some fabulous facilities, and the ratio of teachers to students is much more favorable than it is in other areas where this is not.
But again, that's a challenge to rural schools and poorer schools.
Yes, very much so. And so you're torn between having affluent schools that make the parents very happy that are able to afford that, and having quite different schools that where the teachers, it separates out a little bit like charter schools do also, as far as income, trying to pull off some of the best teachers because they can pay a lot more salary than some of the other areas that need good teachers.
One of the things the court said when dealing with the LOB or the local option budget, that property tax piece, they said if you want to use it for your classroom dollars, you have to take it and run it through the formula. Now, if you want to cause a firestorm, if you want to see angry legislators and people, you go to Johnson County, which has invested in schools through property tax increases in their LOB as much as they could, and tell them, well, that's really good. We're going to take that money and run it through the formula, which means Wichita would get some of their money because we have a high number of at-risk kids. Or if we go out to Mays and tell them, who have invested greatly in their schools on property taxes, and tell them, well, we have to use it, you're going to have, I don't think that will happen. I don't think you will hear a lot of discussion about the local option budget this coming year.
All right, let's take a commercial break. When we come back, we're going to continue our discussion concerning school finance, get into what this means during this session coming up as well. Back in a couple of minutes.
Renovate your kitchen with a countertop that's built to last you and your family a lifetime. Quartz countertop is on sale at Menards. You never have to seal or polish, and it's stain, heat, and scratch resistant. But best of all, it's backed by a lifetime warranty. Upgrade your kitchen with Frigidaire appliances. This smudge-proof stainless steel dishwasher provides 4 times the water coverage with the Orbit Clean Spray Arm. Right now, just $479.
Save big money at Menards. Every day is a savings day. You can shop the savings way at Jabara's Carpet Outlet.
Every day is a savings day at Jabara's Flooring Superstore.
You'll always save with our everyday low prices, but right now you can save up to 20% more on our huge inventory of remnants.
Every day is a savings day at Jabara's Carpet Outlet.
Is our old car a hunk of burning junk? If it shakes and rattles, trade it in and roll into the new year in a nicer, newer car. So bring us your old ride and get way more than it's worth. Past credit problems got you singing the blues? We have more financing options than any other dealership, period. So if your old ride's got you howling like a hound dog, shake, rattle, and roll over to Supercar Guys today.
Buying a car doesn't have to suck.
I got hurt in a car wreck and there's too many bills. I need money now.
Call me, I've got this.
I got hurt and the bills are piling up. I need someone that can win big for me.
I've got this. I'll win for you or you don't pay me a dime.
I called the real Brad and my case was worth $300,000. Brad's got this.
$620,000 for my case. Brad wins.
Get it?
Got it.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, call me. It's just that easy.
Call 1-800-241-BRAD.
And welcome back. We've been talking about the school finance lawsuit, or the school funding lawsuit that we've heard so much about over the past, I don't know how many years. We've seen actually a few of these now. And, you know, it was interesting. Last session, we had the initial decision, which I think a lot of people looked at as almost a gift for the governor and for the legislature. But there was the talk then at that point, and I think a lot of people overlooked this, that the second shoe was still yet to fall. Well, it's come down and it's stomped pretty hard. And, you know, we're talking $500 million here potentially, and we're already $500 million in the hole. So we're getting to the point where it's real money.
Yeah, Kansas is in a financial crisis. Before Tuesday, we were in a serious financial crisis. Now when you add the fact that the court found that the most important thing, the primary duty of the state legislature, which is to fund public schools, has been done inadequately, and that piece is added on top. We're in a major fiscal crisis. And people kind of say, well, I don't get the difference. I thought we did this last year, and didn't you put some money in schools earlier? And there are two silos, for lack of a better word, and the professor mentioned one about equity. That means the fact that you live in a low property value. I live in southeast Wichita. The property down there generates less money than Tallgrass property. 1 mil at a house in South Wichita generates a lot less money than one in Tallgrass because of the value of the property. Should the kids in Tallgrass go to the public schools, have a better school simply because of what I call the zip code roulette? The court has said over and over and over, no, the fundamentals of arithmetic and science and English have to be balanced regardless of your zip code. That's what the equity piece was. Over time, we've let the property tax grow, and that gave the Tallgrasses more money for the bang than South Wichita. Adequacy says, look, you've told schools to perform certain things. So many units of math, so many units of science, foreign language, and you're not paying for that. It's just like when you buy an insurance policy. The more coverage you get, the more your premium is. What's happening is we're asking for a lot of coverage in schools and not paying the premium. And where does that come from? Which is why the question about the state board keeps coming up. There are three sources of requirements that get put on schools, K-12. One is the legislature itself. One is the State Board of Education, which is like this local school board. Only the state board is the state school board for all the schools. And the final one is the Board of Regents, which sets the requirements. What does it take to get into Wichita State? What do you have to have in a high school diploma? And that's where the big ticket item is, because we have been demanding a lot of coverage and not paying the premium for that coverage. And that's what adequacy is.
There is the school of thought that says, okay, we can't just look at throw an X amount of dollars at this situation or fill in the bucket this full of dollars. We have to look and see how students are actually doing, how they're performing on standardized testing. Is money the solution? Maybe we need to do something differently. Richard?
That is a very hot political issue. And it's called outcomes-based education, and we want to measure everything in tests. And the truth is, there's a whole lot more out there to determine school quality than test. And incidentally, the test scores went down previous year, not this year. This year, the scores are not available because there was hacking of the computer systems for running it. And Kansas, incidentally, was one of the pioneers.
What, North Korea, was it?
No. But we were one of the states that was the first, under Andy Tompkins as commissioner, to get our testing all on computers. Okay. And now we're one of the first to be hacked. So we don't have the last year's scores, but the year's scores before that were down, not up. And of course, we're looking at situation where the school funding dropped off dramatically with the recession in 2008. And of course, the governor doesn't come in until after that, so he shows a slight increase, but that's after a dramatic cliff. And we're not climbing back up that cliff again. So we have many schools out there, public schools, where the class sizes have moved from science labs of 20-something all the way up into the high 30s and no labs. And a tremendous number of art and music programs have just been decimated, where teachers that had been teaching for 20 years were let go because that was not part of the assessment, which was measuring the outcomes, therefore. So the one tack that is taken to say, oh, we don't, this is not correct, we can buy more with less money, is to, well, let's look at some scores. Well, the scores aren't there. For 2 years ago, and for this last year we don't know what they are, if you're looking at that. But that isn't what determines the quality in the classroom. It has to do with having a full curriculum with highly qualified teachers, and we have seen dramatic shortages increasing in the last few years across the country, not just here. But in Kansas, we're now producing 1/10 the number of biology, chemistry, physics teachers that are needed, and so they're having to hire people who are not qualified.
You know, Jim, when the court and the legislature looks at this thing, and you obviously in the legislature will get to do that, lucky you.
Whether we want to or not.
Yeah, you have no choice. Adequacy in funding is something that is, we hear a lot, but there's no magic number. What is adequacy in funding? It's not, you know, is it $4,000 per pupil? Is it $4,200? Is it $3,800? How do you determine what that number is, and is there a number?
Yeah, I think we're looking at it, in my opinion, in the wrong area. It's not the dollar amount. It's what the dollar amount does in a classroom. And what we're talking about outcomes, I don't think anybody is saying we shouldn't hold schools accountable and we shouldn't look at the results of where our money's going. You don't spend as much money, almost $2 billion a year on K-12 and not expect to know what the outcomes are. Where the debate is should it be limited to a single test or 2 or 3 tests? How do you factor in music and art and sports, which everyone would agree are critical components to a well-rounded high school education? And how do you put together, and who's involved in making that decision? If you teach in Colvin Elementary, where you have half a dozen languages and a very high at-risk population, and get compared to a May school, which doesn't have some of those challenges, are the standards the same? It's a complicated question for outcomes. So when people, it's not a simplistic answer, we'll just give them a test and pay them based on the test, though that is some people's idea of how to do that. What the court says is there isn't a magic number, but we do know money matters. And you just have to look at what's happened over the last 5 years. You see larger classroom sizes. You've seen 5 buildings close in Wichita in the last 4 years. You see test scores going down. And those are, during that period of time, so has the funding. And so while money matters, what we're going to look at is what happens at the classroom level in terms of what, you can't pay teachers with good intent. You got to have money to do that. You can't buy labs with a promise to pay on another day. You got to put money on. And that's what they're talking about, is when you don't pay, it has a direct impact.
Yeah. This will be appealed. That's just a fact, obviously. What is the process at this point? Because if the appeal happens now, and I'm kind of curious, we're going to talk more about the session here in a few moments, but this will impact the session. It's got to, right?
I would hope so. We have 2 choices. One choice is to say, look, this is just one round in a multi-round battle, and we're going to appeal, and we won't do anything until the Supreme Court speaks. The other option is appeal, but take steps to address adequacy. We can't bite. With our financial crisis right now, we can't write a check to schools for $500 million. But we could take some steps that indicate to the court that we heard them, and we're going to make some steps that they can depend on. One thing I don't think the court will do that they probably wish they hadn't done on the last case, which is close the case immediately. I think, unlike Montoy, Gannon will stay open for a while.
Now, why is that?
Because as soon as Montoy was closed, within a year, we had failed to meet what we had told them we would do to settle the Montoy case back in 2005. So I think the court, and you can kind of see with the way they've dealt with Gannon. They gave us the equity piece. They sent the adequacy piece for more study. I think you're going to see them hold on to this case for review to say, okay, I understand you can't write a check for $500 million or $7, whatever it is, but are you making steps? and not only just in words, because words in Topeka are cheap. What are you actually doing in classrooms? And there will be a series of, I would guess, again, I'm predicting reviews.
And I would imagine the steps are going to be kind of hard to define too, because we don't have any money. So I don't know what the steps would be. I mean, I would imagine you have to make some progress towards that $500 million or whatever the number is. How do you get there?
If we were talking about, because so many people say we should treat state government like a budget on the household budget. If this was your household budget, you know what we tell you to do? Go get a job. Or go get a second job. Okay, because the demands on your lifestyle right now are greater than what you are doing to bring in. And in state government, the argument is, well, we just won't do that. Well, we don't. The one thing we can't not do is schools. It's in the the people of Kansas felt so strongly about public schools, they put it in their constitution. And every time they've been given a chance to review that particular part of their constitution, they have increased the demands, not reduced them. And so the option, which I think some of my more conservative colleagues, which is we won't do it, really won't work. So you have to go get that second job. There has to be a change in the revenue.
Which would be taxes.
Well, that's not a word I'm going to use.
That's the job. Yes.
Interesting. Well, let's take another commercial break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the session and actually start our session preview, because that's coming up in about a week. We'll be back.
Moms Every Day with Rachel Phillips. Weekdays at 11:24 a.m. Brought to you by the sponsors of momseveryday.com.
Welcome back to Moms Every Day. I'm Rachel Phillips. With me today, my special guest, Cynthia Ongeche from Consumer Credit Counseling. Thanks for coming over today.
Thank you. Good morning.
Okay, ladies, today we're going to talk about our credit scores and credit reports, stuff that we don't like to deal with, but we got to stay on top of it.
Yes, I have seen that still the majority of us have no idea what's on our credit report, and yet they are now used for more than just lines of credit. They are used for employment purposes, insurance purposes, utilities, getting a place to rent, if you're wanting to get a cell phone on contract. So we're seeing that they are being used more and more. And yet about 50% of the time they have mistakes. We may have had identity theft issues that we're unaware of. So it is really important that we do take the initiative to get them each year.
Yeah, because it used to be like your money was kind of separate and apart from your job or your landlord, and for some reasons it is, but in some ways they want to know if you're responsible with your money, if they're going to hire you, or if they're going to rent to you. So it's important that we take a look at that. What do we do first?
The first thing would be to pull up the credit report, which we can do for free. There is a website, annualcreditreport.com, just like it sounds. You do want to make sure to put it in the actual address bar, not the search bar, because that will bring up numerous sites that will charge you.
Right.
That is the quickest route. If you would prefer to do it online or by phone, by mail or by phone, they do give you that option online as well. You can print out the form and just send it in. That way it takes you about 2 to 3 weeks. Some people prefer that. And then you want to go through it and make sure that everything that's there is accurate.
Perfect. You have such good advice. And of course, if you need other helpful information from them, you can get more knowledge at our website, momseveryday.com.
For health, home, money, and more, what matters to you and your family is at momseveryday.com.
And welcome back. And of course, school finance has a direct relationship to what happens in the session. And the session will be starting about a week, I guess, it looks like. And Jim, you'll be out there in Topeka and battling out and writing bills and making laws and all that kinds of good things that you guys do. And this could be an interesting one.
Yeah.
They're always interesting, though.
As we watch this show on Sunday morning, most of us will be heading to Topeka because Monday will be, a week from Monday will be the beginning of the session. This session was already challenging. If you remember, a week after the election, we got the bill for the tax cuts for the current year, and we're $280 million short for the next 6 months, and about $450 million on top of that for the next year after that, which we deal with between January and May. So we're about $750 million in the hole, not counting school finance. The governor came out with some ideas.
Put us well over $1 billion at that point.
Yeah, we're talking real money in whatever level of government you're talking about. This is real money. Governor came out about a month ago and said, here's my ideas to fix the first problem, which is the $280 million hole. We're going to steal money from CAPERS, which is the retirees. We're going to steal money from the highway plan, which is promises investment for economic development, and that's about $200 million. And then we're going to have a...
Some people would call it borrowing.
Yeah, we're going to have to work on definitions, because borrowing means I give you money on Tuesday and you pay it back in a reasonable amount of time. When we borrow, we take it and never pay it back, and that's why I call it stealing.
You know, your definition may be a little better than mine, I suppose. But anyway.
But the point is, the governor's plan that fills the hole has to pass the legislature. You have to get 63 and 21 to vote to take $41 million away from the retirement plan, which is a hugely unpopular thing to do. It's less unpopular to take it away from the highway plan.
And the Capers thing, you know, the tragedy there is we were actually kind of making some progress.
Exactly.
And boy, I think, and it was also pretty heavily touted in campaign ads and otherwise. And boy, it just seems like, you know, a step forward, two back, but that's...
Which is why Capers is in the problems it is because we'll make an investment, we'll bite the bullet, and then a year or two later something will happen and we'll take it back. And that yin-yang approach is what's got us in this unfunded liability problem.
Yeah. What else do we see happening in the session? We've heard about abortion restrictions. We've heard about this religious freedom bill, which there were rumblings last session. It may come back.
Okay, let's. There's not much left to do in Kansas on abortion that we are already pushing the envelope and got several cases out there saying we've gone too far in our abortion laws. This last piece is called the heartbeat, which says if you can detect a heartbeat, an abortion is not allowed. And I may be oversimplifying it, but I think that
it's the fetal heartbeat bill, and I think North Dakota.
Somebody's passed it. It's in litigation.
Something similar to that, yeah.
And the governor, I say this is not for me to say, but from what I've heard, the governor's kind of been, let's let some of the lawsuits that are going forward now play out a little bit before we jump into that hot water. Now, what the religious freedom bill says that I can deny services to people, same-sex couples, if I call it religion. It's hugely controversial. Was so hot last year that Susan Weigel, who's fairly conservative, took it off the table and said that we're not going to go that far. I do think that will come back. I think the driver's license and some of that, I think there'll be a push for minimum wage. You notice like 20 states have increased their minimum wage. Places like Nebraska, which is pretty rad, Arkansas, pretty rad, have given pay raises to working families. I think that will come up. I think there will be a lot of discussion more about Capers and what do we do long term and how does, whether the $42 million is taken or not, how does that play in?
Richard, the Capers thing is
yes, it affects teachers too.
Yep.
And so the teachers have been hit by this last legislative session pretty hard because essentially tenure or due process was taken away so that you can be let go after you bought a house and so on and proven yourself for those first 3 years. And then on top of that, Capers, which was seeming to be reinforced all at once, becomes weaker. And this certainly has an effect upon teachers that are already in the classroom, that are vested. And it also has an effect on the overall attitude of young students that are looking at possibly going into teaching. And so this is something that hasn't really been addressed by these actions, but the fact is we have seen a lot of students at the universities that are coming in and saying, instead of doing a BSc, a Bachelor of Science in Education, I'm going to switch over and go into a non-teaching field. And we're looking at something that's going to have a ripple effect 4, 5, 6 years down the road, unless something gives teachers a reason to think that they can gain back some of their professionalism. And part of it, of course, is going to be funding and salaries and security with Capers. And if Capers goes to more of a privatized system, that's not viewed as good.
Let's take a commercial break. We'll continue our session preview talk as we get back after this 2.5-minute break. There's a lot more coming, so we'll be back.
We've been a part of life in Kansas for 60 years. You've invited us into your home night after night, day after day. It's being here when you need us and reinventing how and when you see us. It's knowing what every story means to you and asking the questions others are not. Showing you what's happening now, preparing you for what's coming next. It's who we are. It's who we've always been. Kate News. Tracking, alerting, protecting for 60 years.
Moms Every Day with Rachel Phillips. Weekdays at 11:24 a.m. Brought to you by the sponsors of momseveryday.com.
Welcome back to Moms Every Day. I'm Rachel Phillips. With me today, my special guest, Leanne from the Treehouse here in Wichita, Tell us a little bit about Treehouse.
The Treehouse helps women who have newborn babies and need basic care items to take care of their babies.
And this is a neat program, ladies, because you do offer a free layette when they have the babies, but you have a special cooperative buy-in program where the more they learn, the more they get.
The more we provide, exactly. Yeah. Every time they come to a class, we let them choose if they want diapers or formula or what we call baby bucks to shop in our thrift store.
So obviously this incredible generosity, you need donors to help you back this up. How can we help you in this incredible work?
Of course, we always need financial help, so donations are always appreciated, but we also need anything related to the care of an infant to put in the layettes. So clothes, diapers, formula, any baby supplies.
Special formula that you need?
Similac, always Similac. We try to go along with what WIC uses, and it's a Similac program. So
Similac,
any version of Similac.
Any version of Similac. And we just drop that by your location. Where are you located
We're
at?
at 151 north of Volusia. You can stop by any time. I'm usually there 8:30 to 5. We're open to the public from 10 to 3.
Perfect. And this is a neat way to get involved because this is changing generations in our community. It's not just helping one time for one family.
Exactly. We just opened a new learning center and we're trying to get more into helping with resumes and job searching and really try to change lives.
And the cooperative part of it, I think, is perfect, where they have to come to class to get the benefits that you provide. Thank you so much for sharing with us today. And if you'd like to help the Treehouse here in Wichita, to get more information, you can go to our website, momseveryday.com.
For health, home, money, and more, what matters to you and your family is at momseveryday.com.
And welcome back. We're going to continue our talk about the session preview. We've got the session starting in about a week and a day as this show airs here in the Wichita area and most of the state. And Jim, you know, when you make your trip up to Topeka and you start thinking, and I know you've been thinking longer than this, but you start thinking about all the things that you're faced with and all of the big decisions you're going to make. What's the kind of the top of the tip top of the iceberg for you?
I think there's no question that the debate this year will be the budget. It will suck all the air out of anything we talk about. Will flow through that conversation. The school decision just enhanced that, put it on steroids, supercharged it. When you follow the next tier of things we talked about before we left, some of the social issues, the pay raise. Also, Medicaid expansion is a big deal. The hospitals and critical care access units and the providers are really making a hard push. They've got what they call Can Care 2, which plays into the governor's privatization of our Medicaid program. That's a huge deal. We have a new secretary of KDH&E. There are still significant problems with Can Care. I think there will be some bills to try to address some of the issues that are coming up there.
Let's talk about teachers for a minute, because we were in the break. We were kind of discussing this a little bit, and you mentioned that there will even be some more efforts in that area as far as restricting some of the negotiation abilities.
The committee or commission that was part of the bill that passed last year that had the funding for equity and some of the anti-teacher provisions in it created a commission that's been meeting, and one of the more controversial parts of that was a bill that would restrict the things that teachers and districts negotiate before decisions are made, and limit it only to budget or pay issues. No more discussions about promotion type of stuff. No more discussions about how the day is structured and how much time teachers can use for class planning and that kind of stuff. There's a lot of things that districts agree to negotiate with teachers to create a good working environment that would be taken away. Now, I don't know, the commission had a hard time with it. I don't know how the legislature, that people who passed the bill last year got burned pretty hard. I don't know if they're ready to go down that, but you never know.
Richard, what do you think on that one? Because
that's a tough one, because Kansas actually has put a lot of independence into each individual USD, each individual US school district. And as a result, it makes it difficult to force things upon everyone, because each one is negotiating on their own. And so some of them, as a local school board, for instance, can keep tenure, as Wichita has, while others haven't. You have these little rural schools that are little communities that have certain needs that are quite unique and different from the large urban ones and from the suburban ones as well. And so when you start constraining and saying what they can and can't do, it's a standardization of sorts. It faces a problem that takes local power away in the end. And
this seems ironic to me, Richard, because we have a group of lawmakers who, and we've seen this more than once, have taken that local control or that local power away from our municipal governments, our school boards, our county commissions, our city councils.
Certainly.
And this seems to be kind of counterintuitive.
It is. In fact, in many states, it isn't like it is in Kansas. Each state is unique in the way it arranges its control of schools. And this was a problem for Duncan when he wanted the previous commissioner DeBacker to make agreements for a waiver from No Child Left Behind, that there would be a heavy emphasis on student scores that would be part of the evaluation of each teacher. And she basically said, I can't do that because each of these school districts is independent in the way in which they set up. Some of them may, with the teachers, negotiate in a whole bunch of extracurricular duties, others may not. And it's going to be quite a big difference between urban and rural schools. And she was able to negotiate in spite of that. But this is often used as a boogeyman then by people on one side saying, we need local school control, and then we turn around and find that side also saying, we want to take away this part of school control. And that type of schizophrenia has already occurred in previous sessions, and it's very likely to occur again.
Jim, let's talk about Medicaid expansion for just a couple of minutes.
A subject near and dear to my heart.
I know that, and Governor Brownback is not, he hasn't talked much about it, publicly anyway, and certainly hasn't given any kind of indication that he's for it. Some changes with the legislature, I guess was it last session or the session before, I can't remember, took some of that decision-making power out of his hands and put it with the legislature, which still means it sure sounds like it's not real likely to happen anytime soon, but I know there is a push. Why do you think this is important?
Okay, just a little background. Medicaid is the insurance policies for extremely poor people, children that are poor, and elderly, disabled, community home-based services you hear a lot about. All of that comes from Medicaid. It's a partnership with the federal government where 60 cents comes from the feds and 40 cents comes from the state. Kansas has one of the most selfish Medicaid programs in the country regarding adults. Medicaid expansion was part of the Affordable Care Act, which said we want everyone to have the same floor. Anything below this would qualify for Medicaid. 29 states have taken it. One of the things I find very hopeful, because our governor tends to like to model himself after Texas. Texas is looking seriously at expanding Medicaid. Okay, the hospitals, the critical care hospitals in rural Kansas, where the governor has made a lot of staked a lot of his credentials and spent political bullets being a rural Kansas governor, has said we're going to be starting to close our doors. You see doctors who opposed the original Medicaid program at 65 saying we should do this. So I do think because of the coalition coming together to support Medicaid, the legislature's proviso to say you have to get a legislative approval, if the governor, Brownback, says, I think Medicaid expansion is good for the Kansas, the legislature hasn't said no to this governor yet on anything. So I would be quite surprised if they said no on Medicaid expansion.
And your belief, Jim, you said this on the show before, but you believe this is a moral necessity.
I do. I don't know how you can look at people. I tell a story about the man who called, not his family did. He worked his entire life, 57-year-old, had a terrible stroke, paralyzes him on one side of his body. He will never be able to go back to his job. They called and said, what do we do? The employer has given us the medical leave and paid, and we've had our insurance. That's expired. They need to hire, so we'll lose that. What do? We don't have the resources to carry him by ourselves. And in Kansas, the answer is nothing. We can't help him because of our very extremely selfish Medicaid rules. Under Medicaid expansion, he would be covered. And I think that's a good thing. That's a moral thing. And here's why. We've already paid for it. Everybody who paid their taxes in April, that went into Washington. The piece that goes to Medicaid expansion that would come back to Kansas is going to Ohio, which is expanded under John Kasich, to other states.
Extremely conservative governor, by the way.
A lot of extremely conservative governors are looking at this as just a common sense way to address health needs of their constituents and let the battle wage in Washington over the Affordable Care Act and deal with the fallout. But until then, let's take advantage of our money back to Kansas.
All right. Let's take another commercial break. When we come back, we'll talk about the Democrats in need of a new party chair. We'll be back in 2 minutes.
Being healthy and feeling good makes everything in life better. This year is about change. To live healthier, to find balance, to improve. Join Genesis now with no enrollment fee and our exclusive weight loss boot camp for free. This is the best package we've ever created, and it's only here for a limited time. Welcome to 2015, where excuses are no longer accepted.
2014, Cake News has been with you every day of the year. On air, online, on your mobile. Tracking the big stories.
I'm leaving with joy in my heart.
That was an earthquake.
Alerting you to breaking news.
You can see a lot of smoke coming from inside.
Protecting you and your family.
Today's really your day to make some of those preparations.
Ramping up in intensity as we go through the night.
We've seen tragedy.
4 confirmed as deceased.
Woman inside the fire.
We've seen history. We've seen wild weather.
That's a tornado.
Like someone was just throwing stuff at our window.
We've said goodbye to old friends.
To the people here at Cake, I say thank you.
And hello to new ones.
Welcome.
Thank you. In 2015, trust Cake News to continue delivering the big local stories that are important to you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching.
Always tracking, always alerting, always protecting. Cake News.
36 boys and girls teams, 18 high schools. One chance to prove we're way out of your league. It's the WATC Basketball Challenge, January 8th through 10th at Koch Arena. For matchups and team info, check out WATCBasketballChallenge.com. Brought to you by Wichita Area Technical College, Cakeland, Byte Magazine, and Intercom Radio. The WATC Basketball Challenge.
And welcome back. The Democrats are in need of a new party chair. Joan Wagner has announced that she will not take that position again or attempt to go for that position again. And Jim, I think you probably know more about this than any of the rest of us.
The state party chairman, whether a Democrat or Republican, you had Kelly on last week. I think he and I would both agree on this. It is a thankless job. There's a lot of moving pieces. The state, even Kansas, is very diverse. It's a difficult job. Joan Wagner has been our chair for 4 years. She did an excellent job. She put together a team that was competitive until the last day of the last election, and she's stepping down. The reasons that we were unsuccessful in the last election are bigger than the state party chair. Our Democrats have a fundamental problem right now. We are perceived by a lot of people as a 4-county party.
Well, I was going to say there's not many of them, first of all. That might be your biggest problem.
Well, yeah, we need more of us. And one of the reasons...
You're outnumbered.
If you live in Johnson, Wyandotte, Douglas, or Shawnee, you feel empowered in Democratic politics. We used to have a representative in Pittsburgh, and Hayes, McPherson, Hutchinson, Ark City. Dennis McKinney represented Greensburg, which is 3-1 or 3-2 Republicans. That's no longer primarily 4 counties, and we have to change that. We have to do more, first of all, to talk to Kansans and say, we are not the Washington party. It's different to be a Massachusetts Democrat than it is to be a Kansas Democrat. And when we do that well, we get people like Kathleen Sebelius, Joan Finney, John Carlin. When we don't do it as well, we lose elections.
Well, and even this last cycle, as you alluded to, it was pretty obvious how in some of the races, national politics had a huge role. I mean, look at the Senate seat, for example. And I mean, I know that was an independent, but even so,
I think the cat got let out of the bag on that one.
Just a bit.
But here's what I think happened. A lot of people said, well, the polls are all wrong. Or I think when people 3 days out said, I'm going to vote for Paul Davis, and he was up by 2 or 3 points, I think if we would have voted that day, we would have won by 2 or 3 points. What happened? And the Republicans, I call it dark money, third-party independent money, spent enormous amounts of money to say, this isn't about Sam Brownback or even Pat Roberts. This is about being a Republican in a year where you have to be a Republican if we're going to have any chance of controlling Washington. And they were able to give people uniforms, and if you're a Republican, you went in there and said, I'm not really happy with Pat Roberts. I'm not really happy with Sam Brownback, but I have to be a Republican this time. And I think that swung the election in the last 48 to 72 hours.
Yeah, interesting. So whoever takes that position or whoever gets that position, it's a tough job.
It is a very tough job. It's a tough job for the Republicans to do too, because we have a lot of different people, forces in our party. We have a lot of different geographies. And to keep that, and there's a rebuilding to do. There are a lot of Democrats are still licking their wounds after the last election.
Yeah. So what happens then? Does somebody actually run for this? Or?
Oh yeah, it can. Yes, in late February, early March, we'll have our statewide party. The Republicans usually do theirs in late January, early February. We do ours in late February, early March. At that point, there'll be an election. It can be one person, 5 people, whoever gets nominated, and there will be a vote of the state party members who get elected from locals to 4th district, 3rd district, and then they go to the state party and they will make that selection.
Is it difficult to get somebody who wants the job?
There are always a lot of people who would like to be the state party chairman. The next question is we need a qualified person who has about 3 skill sets. One is they're very good at listening and bringing people together. 2, they better be able to raise money. And 3, can they persuade people to put up their nickel as a Democratic candidate in a difficult election environment, which is Kansas.
Yeah, challenging position. Well, that's interesting. So we'll see how that goes and see who the new person is coming up in
We'll do just fine.
February,
We'll
March.
find somebody talented to do it.
There you go. Let's take another commercial break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Koch's influence on state and local politics. We did this a week or so ago, but we're gonna do it again. We'll be back in 2 minutes.
Get your family back to New Way this month and experience our all-new fresh hand-cut fries. This month, combo our delicious bacon cheddar New Way, hand-cut fries and root beer for $5.99.
What's one thing maybe people don't know about you?
It's definitely the military history. No one ever pegs me for that because they think, oh, she likes history. But then when I'm like, no, I really like looking at B-24s and the impact they had on
Well, you're
Europe.
going to love Wichita then.
I know.
I mean,
I'm so excited about that.
We got to take you to the Kansas Aviation Museum.
Oh,
You'll love that.
I already have a trip planned, actually. It's going to be so much fun.
But she doesn't get to ride in the airplanes because that's my job.
That's just, I won't take that from you.
Mike Jamel, Frank, and Gloria. Weekday mornings on Good Morning Kansas.
Modern Family, TV's picture-perfect comedy. From mugshots to beauty shots.
Hold that, good, now smolder. Perfect.
Nobody captures comedy like Modern Family.
Better arms down. There you go. Can I get a coffee? Oh, there'll be a lot of coffees. Oh, great.
TV's picture-perfect comedy, Modern Family, nightly.
Weeknights at 6:30, only on Cakeland.
Your website is a direct reflection of your business. Create a dynamic and responsive website with the power of LocalX. LocalX is a full-service, national quality-level digital agency dedicated to local business. Together, we will maximize the growth of your organization in your community. Contact a local expert and get started today. LocalX, your local digital marketing experts. Go online at localxmarketing.com.
We've been a part of life in Kansas for 60 years. It's being here when you need us, showing you what's happening now, preparing you for what's coming next. It's who we are. It's who we've always been. Cake News, tracking, alerting, protecting for 60 years.
And welcome back. The Koch family's influence on state and local politics is what we're going to talk about in this section. We actually did this 2 weeks ago. It reran last week because of the holidays, but got a lot of emails after that one, and a lot of the criticism was pretty pointed and probably pretty appropriate because we only had one side represented, and I always try to represent both sides on the show. Sometimes things happen that it doesn't work out that way. For example, tonight we had a pretty conservative guest that was supposed to be on who is very ill. So we kind of leaned a little bit towards the left on the show tonight. So that's kind of how the mechanics work with the program, though. Try to represent as best we can, and if we can't, we'll do it the next week. And so we're going to do Koch Part 2, and we talked a little bit about influence on state and local politics. And one of the things I said in the program when we did this initially was, I think the Kochs take a lot of heat and get beat up a lot because they put their money where their mouths are. And I guess one of the points I would make was, what's wrong with that? I mean, if you truly believe something and you have the financial wherewithal to support your belief, why is that a bad thing?
I don't think it's a bad thing. Rich people have tried to buy elections since democracies began. We used to call it the Gilded Age, when the Rockefellers and the Stanfords and the Jay Goulds did it. Yeah. Here's where I think the Kochs, I have my criticism. First of all, I don't think movie stars are any better at picking presidents or senators than anybody else. And I don't think because you're good in business makes you better at picking policies. But that doesn't mean you can't participate and you don't have the right for your platform. Where I have my biggest criticism with the Kochs is they do it in secret. And they get very angry if you try to explain their influence on politics through their money. When you saw what happened in Wichita, they had to disclose how much money came from the Kochs, and it was almost all of the money.
Now you're talking about the
sales tax,
the sales tax referendum that we just saw recently for the. There are 4 parts to
the
it.
roads,
water, jobs, and
right.
public transport.
Right. That was almost all, over $1 million, which is virtually every penny of the TV and radio. Okay. They do the same thing in state elections. They do it through the State Chamber of Commerce. They do it through Americans for Prosperity. They do it through Clubs for Growth. They do it for direct investment, the Republican Party, where they refuse to let us know what those numbers are. I'll give you a little anecdotal story. There is a professor at KU, Art Hall is his name, and he is funded by the Kochs. That's well known, and he comes over and testifies quite a bit. Some student group has, under the Kansas Open Records Act, is asked to see how much money the Kochs put into Art Hall's seat. The Kochs are taking him to the Supreme, they're fighting it tooth and nail. That's my criticism. Not that they have money and want to spend it in politics. They just won't let us know what it is. That's secret and kind of becomes dark money.
Let the emails
We
begin.
can laugh, but if you've ever had all of that mail come on to you, it feels dark to you.
Well, okay, Jim, I'm just going to say this. You're a Democrat. This sounds like sour grapes.
Really?
What if they were going to write you a big check? They said, what if Charles Koch had a change of heart and he thought, boy, that Jim Ward, I really like that guy, and I think he's doing a great job. I'm going to write him a big check and support him in his next campaign bid.
And that some of the folks that talked to me after the election, when I would say, look, I'm very frustrated with dark money, they said, quit whining about it, go get your own, which is basically what your question is. I don't think my position would change.
I said it nicer, though.
I know, because you are much. I'm surprised I'm
It is true.
My point is this. I don't think dark money, secret dark money, is good, whether it's done on our side or their side. I think it's all right for all of these people to participate, but I'm in favor of transparency and disclosure. So voters can say, when they get cards from a group that has a really fancy name, Citizens for a Better America, they know who that is. Yeah. And they can say, I think that's great, the Kochs are wonderful people, I agree with them politically, I'm going to vote for them. On the other hand, I'm not a big fan of the Kochs. So I look at that mail differently. And I think that transparency is where my biggest problem with the Kochs are. And I think it is, my final statement is, naive to think that the Kochs don't have a huge influence in local, county, and state politics in Kansas. They do. They're one of the largest companies in the world. Yep. And they're stationed right here in Wichita, Kansas. They have a big influence.
Now, it is interesting. You mentioned the vote yes, or the vote no, excuse me, Wichita. I'm trying to think what the campaign, what they called themselves. It was Citizens for a Better Wichita, was that it? Something like that. Yeah. And they did fund a significant portion of that, 90-some%. Obviously had a pretty large amount of influence on that effort. Statewide, what kind of things are you seeing up at the legislature that you wondered? And we mentioned, you talked about this during the break, I don't know if you want to bring it up, but Kelly Arnold was kind of
teasing me.
Yeah, teasing you a little bit last program about a tweet that you sent out.
Yeah. I appreciate this equal time. Sometimes we do it on the same show, but we get the same airtime, so we're happy. Yeah. Kelly's right. I did send out a tweet about the Kochs. During the debate on the budget last year and the anti-teacher stuff, I sent out a tweet that said there's a rumor going around the chamber as we were sitting waiting for that the Kochs are in the building. When in fact the Kochs weren't in the building, but their guy was. Their guy was in the building involved in back discussions. Nothing wrong with that at all. The Kochs are involved. They are. My only thing is put it out there. Own it. If you have this opinion, you want to spend your money, own it. Don't hide. Stand up and say, this is me and this is why I'm doing it. And I see the Kochs are doing more of that. I see Charles on television a little bit more. and they did some ads. And
You know, it is. I'm glad you brought that up. It is very interesting. When I came to Wichita 20-some years ago, you didn't see the Kochs in front of the camera ever. You didn't see them quoted in the paper ever. I would assume, and I don't know that they were as active back then as they are now. Maybe they were, but they do seem to be a lot more out there now than they were. And I'm not sure why that is. If that's just a change, or but you do see it more, I think.
I have two comments on that. One is a compliment. These are smart guys. I mean, their father was a John Bircher. They weren't very successful in politics in the 50s and 60s. David ran for vice president as a libertarian.
Yeah.
They kept running into walls, and what they said is, I paraphrase this from just watching it. They haven't called me and said, this is what we're doing. Don't want that. But this is, what they've done is build some intellectual background. They funded the Cato Institute and some of these things to build Dave Trabert's group. We don't know the funding, but everybody assumes there's a big Koch investment in the Kansas Policy Institute to provide an academic background or policy statements. They've invested in party structure. They've invested in third-party PACs like the Americans for Prosperity. They've built a fairly significant network, and now they're being, when you're successful, people want to have a conversation, and they're coming out and talking more. Yes.
Yeah. Richard?
I am sitting to the left of Jim, and I am to the left of Jim, but I would like to a little bit defend that we have to look at things individually. First of all, Supreme Court ruled, Citizens United, super PACs are possible, and there's an ability to hide money under that. That's, if we're going to change that, you're going to have to do it legislatively. Otherwise, it works that way. It works for George Soros as much as for the Koch brothers. But it's a little worrisome when sometimes we polarize and demonize the other side and make it completely the opposite. We find, if you take a look at the Koch brothers, they've also invested $25 million into the United Negro College Fund. It's a terrible thing to waste. The Libre Initiative, which is social services for Hispanics. And so what it comes down to is really, in
Big
the
donation
end,
to Wichita State just recently.
yeah,
as well.
we have to address the individual debate on the issues of what it is, and remain, ladies and gentlemen, in that debate until the political scene changes in a way that forces everything to be open. So it's the playing field you have to play with.
Well, Richard, I think that's a valid, certainly a valid point, and I appreciate that. And I think Jim would agree with that as well. You know, it's just an interesting thing when you get into politics. There are very strong feelings on both sides, and that's why I wanted to spend a little bit of time in this program discussing this issue as well, like we did in the last program, because there were some emails from some people that were a little upset, and probably rightfully so. Anyway, go ahead and send me your emails. I'll read them. We'll try to respond to them or do something about them. We appreciate you guys being on the show. We appreciate you watching. If you have any questions or comments, there's the email, thisweekinkansas@cake.com. I hope everyone has a wonderful week.
Car accident?